Not a matter of if, but when crisis will rock your world. I'm Roshini Rajumar, crisis strategist, licensed attorney, and host of The Crisis Files. In each case file, we look into hot topics with people on the inside. Aalok Sharma is partner at Stinson and chair of the firm's gaming committee. Prediction markets are getting a lot of attention and maybe even negative headlines. Whether you're betting on what a Super Bowl quarterback is going to have for breakfast or which candidate will win an election, court actions and legislative regulations are a sure bet. Aalok is here for the case file I call Prediction Market Mayhem. Aalok, there's so much to cover here, but let's get some definitions kind of out of the way. When we're talking about sports betting, what do we mean?
Yeah, sports betting is the existing regulations or the existing framework that's been around since 2018 or so in the vast majority of states. I think Minnesota is one of the last states to, for a few remaining states that hasn't legalized it. So it's what you think of, that's, when you go to a sports book and you place a bet or wager. It's that existing framework that's been around for decades, and that's traditionally what sports betting has been.
And we're talking about these prediction markets. Give us also a little bit of a visual on that. It comes up always when there are the big horse races of the spring or even the Super Bowl, but it's really a big machine.
Yeah, prediction markets are a different regulatory framework. They operate under a different regulatory framework. That framework exists under the CFTC, which is the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. And the way that this works, or the way that this is different from traditional sports betting, is these are considered swaps. So they're a financial instrument. And because they are exchanged on a federal exchange, or they're handled on a federal exchange, states don't have any ability to constrain them. And that's the fight that we're seeing. So when you see something happen on Super Bowl Sunday and someone is saying, place a bet on your favorite mobile sports betting app, that is a sports wager. When you are placing I call it when you take a position on a contract on call sheet or Polymarket, one of these prediction markets, you're engaging on a different financial product. Or that's the argument that these prediction markets are making. They are distinct and different products than what you would see on sports books.
So yes, and why is it important that they are different to them?
Yeah, it's important that they're different because, well, that's a sort of funny question, or an interesting question. Sports betting is a pretty novel thing in the U.S., right? It's been around since 2018, at least widespread. Before that, you could do that in Nevada and some other jurisdictions. What we're seeing here with prediction markets is a novel interpretation of existing statutes that have been around since 2010 or even earlier than that. You have to remember the Commodities Exchange Act is what created the CFTC. And so what courts and prediction markets are doing are construing parts of that legislation to sort of say, look, this swap is a financial product that's different from a sports bet. And so therefore, it's different from what states are trying to do with gaming laws. So whatever New Jersey or Nevada has traditionally done with sports gaming law or gaming laws in general are different from what the CFTC and what they're called as DCMs or designated contract markets are doing with regards to these swaps, which are financial products.
Well, how you describe this, really, I hadn't thought of it until just now as you define some things for us. These are actual contracts. I mean, there are so many legal angles to the prediction markets that I'm not sure the regular person really understands.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of arguments and commentary out there about sort of if it looks like a duck and it quacks like a duck, it should be a duck. But that's where the distinction sort of ends, because there's a lot of legal definitions that make these different. What the prediction markets are saying are these are contracts. They're essentially binary yes/no contracts. So if you're looking right now that Twins are at the top of the AL Central, you could make a yes/no position on will the Twins win more or less than 80 games. That's a yes/no contract. So you could say, look, I believe that the Twins are going to do really well this year. I'm going to place a position on a contract and say they're going to win more than 80 games. Well, on the other side of that contract, someone is saying, I don't think they're going to win more than 80 games. So they buy the opposite position on that contract. So at the end of the season, right, once we get to the end of, when we're in October, maybe, right, and maybe the Twins are still playing, that contract closes. And then essentially the contract resolves into either yes or no. Did the Twins win less or more than 80 games? And if you accurately said, they were going to win more than 80 games, you would essentially get the other side of the contract. And so it's different, right? Again, so these designated contract markets, the way that they make revenue is they take a portion of that contract price. So it's usually in the couple percentage points. A sportsbook is a little bit different, right? Sportsbook makes monetary, what they call is sort of the vig or the juice, right? It's why you see sort of the spread is sort of a little off one way or the other. It's because the sportsbook typically makes money on the difference on the line. And so what these designated contract markets say, and what they have been saying publicly, is we're different from a sportsbook because we don't care one way or the other whether you win or lose the bet. Our interest is on the value of the contract. Sportsbooks do care because sometimes they may take a position and they bear a lot of that liability on their balance sheets or their income statements, and they're hoping that a certain position resolves the other way so that they don't have to pay out those bets.
There's a lot of money involved here. So give us a sense of that number or those numbers.
Yeah, there is a lot of money. I believe as of a few weeks ago, Kalshi had a larger market cap than DraftKings, which has been around for a long time, right? And so Kalshi's only been around for in the US, for maybe 4 or 5 years, right? So you're thinking that huge market cap, huge opportunities, lots of volume is being traded on these exchanges. And the vast majority of that volume is sports betting or sports contracts, right? They wouldn't call it betting; they would call them sports contracts. So, hundreds of millions of dollars on the Super Bowl, to even the Oscars or the Emmys, right? You can essentially do almost anything on these prediction markets in terms of placing a position one way or the other.
All right. So you've given us some visuals here, but there's definitely a dark side, a downside. And gambling, that term, and addiction comes up. So there are some negative narratives happening. I don't see those going away. And it sounds like different states are trying to regulate even that because of the downside.
Yeah, look, I think problem gambling is what's typically called is a real addiction. It's a real problem. I think that's why the regulated marketplace is so important, because regulated operators have an obligation, whether either their states and local governments, or if you're talking about sort of these prediction markets, they have an obligation to make sure that their customers aren't essentially being swindled, right? So we see that, for example, with insider trading on these prediction markets, right? The markets themselves, so Kalshi, Polymarket, and their terms and conditions say we ban insider trading. The CFTC also has rules that ban insider trading. So that's one way where you see sort of there's consumer protections that are happening. But for sportsbooks, the same thing are happening too, right? You have responsible gaming mechanisms. So, sportsbooks have an obligation at some point to say, we have concerns that you are betting beyond your means. We're going to put you in a timeout, or we're going to not let you bet and wager on our platform anymore. And that's important because, again, gambling addiction is real. I think a lot of people don't know that, but it's very similar to other types of addictions when you think about dopamine and the activity in your brain.
I think we can see it. We even just in the casual bets you might place on at the Belmont Stakes, on one of the horses. Tell us a little bit more about New York requiring monthly statements to the gambler. That's interesting.
Yeah, so there's a lot of pending legislation throughout the U.S. now. We recall, so 2018, Supreme Court said states can legalize sports betting. There was essentially a rush to the marketplace, right? States saw this as an opportunity to essentially refill their budgetary holes, right? We're going to regulate and legalize sports betting, and then we're going to tax it. Well, I think along the way, some states now have sort of buyer's remorse about how they went about and quickly legalize sports betting. So you're starting to see some state legislatures enact different types of legislations and regulations about, responsible gaming. And some of those are succeeding and some of them are not. I think one proposal, for example, that you mentioned is in New York, where the legislature is proposing that legalized operators, those that are regulated within the state, have an obligation to send a monthly statement to their customers saying, this is how much you bet, this is how much you lost, this is how much you won. Information is power here. Some states are changing the age for when people can, participate on these apps, right? So maybe it's not 18 years old, maybe it's 21 years old. Colorado has a bill that's being proposed that would limit the number of deposits that you can make on a daily basis. Again, I think some of these regulations make sense. And some of them, the regulators are doing them themselves, right? So one of the things that we've seen is credit card bans. So no longer can you refill your wallet on these betting platforms using a credit card. Regulators have voluntarily done that, and I think state legislatures are going to quickly follow and put that.
Well, you can see how that's a recipe for disaster. If you can use your credit card, I mean, it's just kind of an unlimited, right? Free money, but really someone's got to pay the piper, and eventually it will be the gambler that has the problem with that final credit card bill.
Yeah, that's right. There's certainly some concerns about credit card bills and credit cards and the use of, like I said, numerous deposits without any real meaningful checks. And we're starting to see state legislatures do something about that.
So as you mentioned, 2018, Supreme Court says, okay, states, you can have gambling, but you have to regulate it within your state. So gave it over to the states to do it. In the now going on a decade since that happened, there are always these different shifts that happen. So even from that date to now, there have been big changes. You've called them seismic shifts. What's the next seismic shift in this world, Aalok?
Well, I think what we're seeing right now is the prediction markets. That's the next big seismic shift. And the reason that prediction markets are succeeding the way they are is really a couple of reasons. You have a lot of states, a handful of states, where there's actually large population centers, Texas, California, that haven't legalized sports betting. And so now you're able to offer a prediction market in those jurisdictions. So now consumers have an ability to start essentially, I'm not going to say placing bets, but they have an ability to interact with products that would essentially, mirror a bet. And so that's one reason why we're starting to see a lot of activity. The age for these platforms is 18 years old, and state legislatures are saying, hey, you have to be 21. So right now, the big seismic shift is prediction markets. And again,
just to be clear, prediction markets different from what we consider sports gambling, sports betting. And it has its own separate regulatory space that legislators and legislatures, as well as the federal government, have to be considering.
Yeah, so prediction markets, this is what's going on in the court system right now. Prediction markets are saying, and the CFTC as well, are saying that states have no ability to regulate prediction markets. States are saying, well, you are offering a gambling product, and therefore gambling has been traditionally reserved for the states to handle. And so therefore prediction markets are within our sphere. And the court cases so far have sort of been a mixed bag. But to be fair to the highest court to rule on this issue so far has said that prediction markets, states have no ability to regulate prediction markets. The CFTC has the ability to regulate them because these are swaps, and they're swaps that are exchanged on a designated contract market. So right now, we're getting a mixed bag. It may vary on this, where you are right now in the country, where you can interact with prediction markets or how you can interact with them. This is certainly going to be something that the Supreme Court probably has to resolve at some point. But I think right now, that's right. They're different products. One is a sports betting product that is regulated by the states, and one is a financial. It's a swap. It's a financial instrument that's exchanged on an exchange that's been approved by the CFTC.
Well, it's good you're keeping track of all of this because even though I'm a licensed attorney, all of this is still very new to me. I'm not a bettor. I'm not a gambler. I don't plan to participate in this, but it is still something I watch as a crisis strategist. We care about it here on the show because we want to prevent the negative side of this. Well, we will stay in touch with you to stay on top of this. You can connect directly with Aalok on LinkedIn at Aalok Sharma or check out his firm's website, Stinson.com. This case file is powered by Closet Therapy. Does getting dressed in the morning feel like a mini crisis? Closet Therapy is exactly what you need. Stylist Zoe Stern helps you simplify your wardrobe and feel confident. No pressure, no trends. Clients access a private platform that turns their closet into a virtual space with outfit ideas and ongoing support. View all the ways to wear what you already own. Shopping recommendations and in-person styling are also available. Visit myclosettherapy.com to learn more. Rate, review, and subscribe to The Crisis Files on your platform of choice. Follow us on YouTube, Instagram, and X at The Crisis Files. Visit thecrisisfiles.com for all 4 seasons of the show. I'm Roshini Rajumar. Join me next time on The Crisis Files.